Hi everybody, welcome, thank you for coming. This session is about redesigning a service for vulnerable users in a digital age. So first up, we're going to introduce ourselves. So my name's Suzanne, I work for the Department of Health and Social Care, and I'm the product owner for the project that we're going to be giving you a bit of information about.
Hi, I'm Andy Kemp. My role is a business unit lead for Equal Experts. I was also working with the team for the first few months of the Healthy Start digitisation beta as kind of a BA product type role.
Hi, I've got my own mic, I don't need that. So I'm Chris Brown. I work for Equal Experts as a user researcher. So all things to do with the users, the end users.
So the Department of Health and Social Care is collaborating with Equal Experts on a project to digitise Healthy Start. So what is Healthy Start? Essentially, it's a benefit that's paid to eligible families to help them buy fruit, vegetables, milk and infant formula. It comes in the form of paper vouchers, which you can see up here on the screen. At the moment, it's worth £3.10 per voucher, and you get one voucher per eligible child every 4 weeks. Healthy Start also entitles you to vitamins drops for children and vitamin tablets for pregnant women, and those vouchers come every 8 weeks. The vouchers can be redeemed in around 22,000 retailers currently across the UK. Just to give a bit of a history of the scheme, it started in 1941 as the welfare food schemes, and the intention was, it was a universal measure introduced after the Second World War to ensure that pregnant women and children were receiving milk during times of rationing and shortages. So it's often referred to as milk tokens. Some of you may have heard that terminology used before. So it went along as the welfare food scheme for quite a long time. And then in 2005, it was sort of rebranded as Healthy Start, and it was made a targeted scheme rather than universal. It was first introduced in Devon and Cornwall in 2005, and the vouchers were worth £2.80. And then a year later, it rolled out nationally. In 2009, the voucher value went up to £3.10, and frozen fruit and veg were added. Previously, it was only fresh fruit and veg. So that's kind of a bit of a potted history of the scheme. So who are the people that can access the scheme? So this is some of our Healthy Start branding across the top here. Our users are families who are on low incomes in receipt of certain benefits. And to be eligible, you have to be from 10 weeks pregnant up until your child is 4. And all pregnant women under the age of 18 are eligible, regardless of whether or not they're receiving benefits. And women with a child under the age of 1 receive an additional voucher to help with good nutrition in breastfeeding. So for that first year of life, they would get 2 vouchers instead of 1 for that particular child. And the focus of our talk is really about our vulnerable users. So we need to define what we mean by vulnerability. So again, more of our graphics for our branding. But typically, our users have quite chaotic lifestyles. They move address quite often. Some of them are fleeing domestic abuse, and it can often be quite hectic. We started off with an assumption of what vulnerable users may mean, and through our research and talking and engaging with our users, it's grown into more than we imagined it at first, and it's helped us to understand them. So we now know about these sort of chaotic lifestyles that they lead. We know that many of them have low digital skills, which obviously is really key considering we're digitising the service. So we need to understand what their needs are. And many of them have English as their second language, so we need to be really careful about the content that we have and the language that we use. So why are we digitising it in the first place? As part of the government's drive to become digital by default, we were asked to look at Healthy Start and see what opportunities they were to sort of update the scheme. And the whole digital by default movement came in a few years ago. Is on the back of some guidelines developed by a lady called Martha Lane Fox, and she set out sort of 10 guidelines to bring everything together in a digital form rather than having some services that were digital, some that were paper-based, some that were accessed over the phone. So government adopted all of these principles. It kind of kick-started the gov.uk movement. So we were asked to have a look at what options we had to do this with Healthy Start. So we're following the government digital service sort of life cycle of the project. So in 2016, we did a discovery, so investigate the problem, find out what potential options we have to look at. And then in 2017 and 18, we completed a very short alpha phase of 8 weeks, where we did a bit of prototyping, talked to our users, we gave users some of the options that we discovered in the discovery phase and tested those out. And then we're now currently in the beta phase where we're doing more prototyping, testing with a wider range of users and sort of spreading our research out across the country. So the aims of the policy are here for you all to read. And I guess in the context of the presentation that we're doing today, the ones that really resonate are leave no one behind, because we don't want our service to forget about our really vulnerable people, and to retain the integrity of the scheme. We know that our users really value it, and they're really positive about it. So we want to retain that in the change that we're doing through to a digital service. So what's the challenge? Why is this difficult? This is a sort of visualization of our scheme at the moment. So we've got our vulnerable users. They have a paper application form at the moment, which they have to get from a GP or a children's centre or a midwife or a health visitor. And then they have to take that form away with them, fill it in. They have to get a counter signature from a healthcare professional to confirm that they are who they say they are, and to confirm that they're pregnant if it's for a pregnant woman. That all takes a long time, back and forth, lots of delays, and then the form gets posted off and processed, and essentially our users just have to wait, and then vouchers just start appearing in the post. They come every 4 weeks. They're paper, they're not particularly robust, they're easily damaged, they have an expiry date on them. We hear anecdotes from people who regularly forget to take them with them when they're going shopping, so it's not the most robust of systems. And then there's a certain amount of stigma when the paper voucher is used in store. It's very obvious that you're using a voucher to put towards your shopping, which our users don't really like. So the challenge is to go from this very paper-based system to a digital solution. So our user group won't change, that's exactly the same. We're changing it to an online application form instead of a paper application, and users will receive an instant decision whether they're eligible and how much they're entitled to. So there's no waiting. You kind of know, I'm going to get a card in the post in a few weeks, so we'll send them a prepaid card. We'll update that every 4 weeks with the amount that they're entitled to, and they can go and use that card in a store using contactless or using a chip and pin, and they can put the money that's on the card towards their shopping. Here's some figures to sort of give you an idea of the scale of the service that we've got. So currently around 290,000 users. That's about 65% of people who are eligible. So we think there's around 500,000 people across the UK who are eligible to receive Healthy Start, but only 65% are doing so at the moment. We receive around 12,000 applications every cycle. Not all of those are eligible applications, but that kind of gives you an idea as to how many applications we receive and the sort of processing that's involved at the moment. So I'm going to hand over to Andy to talk a little bit about our team.
Hi. So you know a little bit about the service we're trying to digitise. I think one of the key things for us is that to create a great service, we need a great team. So I want to talk a little bit about how we've structured the team and what kind of people are in the team. So we're very much looking at service design as a team activity. We don't have a service designer who's kind of leading the charge on service design. It's a collaborative design activity. Everyone's working together with a team. And we have some key delivery principles that kind of are key, we think, to delivering this service in the way we need to. So we do, and all these three things I've called out, we're not talking too much detail. I think there's probably a couple of talks in the conference about each of these topics, but we follow kind of a dual track Agile type approach. So we do just enough experimentation and research before we pass information to developers to create code. The software development is expensive. We want to make sure we're building the right thing for our users, or the best thing that we know right now. And the theme that will come a lot is collaboration. So every decision we make is a conversation between all team members. And we take a continuous delivery approach, so there's always working software available to release to our users when they need it. So this is what the team looks like. So we've got one broad team. There's about 12 people in the team. And the areas of responsibility are kind of in three areas, really. So that we've got Chris working with the UX team, looking at the user side of things. We've got developers, who's responsible for the tech. And one of the really great things for me for this particular project is we have policy embedded within the delivery team. So I think this is like the 6th government department I've been involved in building services for. And so often it's policy comes first and we're trying to fix something around policy, and if policy were involved in talking to digital, we could design a better service. So I'll go into a bit more detail about each of the teams. So that kind of policy group, so we've got Becky, who's our service manager, and she's actually the person within the Department of Health who is responsible for the policy. So it's right at the heart of the policy. So all the research that we do goes to her. So as she's looking across the policy, she knows what we know. She knows the complexity in delivering a service, that she knows the problems the users are having. And Suzanne, the product owner, she's setting the priorities for the team. She's making sure we know what we need to do, and she's understanding what we're doing in the research. And she's also the person who's put in the legislation. So this scheme change it's a legislative scheme, so we need to put new laws through. So she's working with the lawyers to actually draft legislation. So we know that the legislation is not going to hinder us delivering a great service, because Suzanne is right in the core of what we're doing. We also have an associate product owner who's Tony, and she's been working in the operational area of the scheme for a number of years, so she really knows how the scheme works today. And then we've got the kind of UX side of things. So this is a very collaborative team, so each person has leads on a particular area, but they all work very closely together. They all run user research sessions, they all go to the research, but Chris takes a lead on understanding user needs, and our colleague Laura takes a lead on the actual interaction design. She converts those user needs into prototypes. And then we have content designer Sam working alongside them, who makes sure that it's particularly because we have lots of users, as we talked about, with English as a second language or low digital skills, low reading ability. We really need to make sure that when people are using our service, the content is just enough and clear enough for people to be able to use it. And the tech team, so it's quite a small team, so we've got 4 people. We've got a tech lead, and it's a tech lead who codes, pairs with the other developers, but he's also facilitates design decisions, and is kind of the interface to other government departments and other people around the department and government. We've got 2 developers building Java microservices. The team build, deploy everything themselves onto the government platform as a service. And then we've got a front-end developer who also pairs with the Java stuff, but he's responsible for putting together the UI framework that we use to effectively build our application for. And then the 2 people which I kind of see as the glue in the middle, so Brian, who's down the front here, is our delivery lead, and Karen, our BA. They make sure that all these parts come together, and actually we have a backlog which has the right level of detail that we can continuously get work going out and software built. Brian does a great job of keeping everyone honest and making sure everyone's having conversations. So if someone goes out to do a workshop, they come back and download to the team. So making sure that all that stuff joins up. I'm going to hand over to Chris to talk about some principles.
Thank you. So Suzanne mentioned back a while some of the goals, and there's one goal in particular which is quite a difficult one, and it's the one where we say no one gets left behind. And it's really, you've got to think about that and think, well, no one, that's quite a statement, that's quite a difficult thing to do. You're going to take people existing on the scheme, you're going to bring them across to a new scheme, and we're going to make sure everybody comes across. So one of the first things we did is we got together as a team, collaborated, and we sat down and we decided how are we going to do that? How are we going to leave no one behind? Because it's such an important goal to do for the users. And the way we did it is we came up with 3 principles, so I'm just going to talk through them. Principle 1 is ongoing real dialogues. And what this is about really is it's just about making sure that we're constantly talking to our users, constantly talking to the vulnerable users in particular, understanding their needs, getting feedback from them, putting things in front of them, user testing, and just continuing that throughout the project. The next principle, what would Rani do? So we developed some personas, hard to reach personas in particular. One of them was Rani. Rani is a fleeing an abusive relationship. She has English as a second language, she has low digital skills. So she's really quite vulnerable. And at each point when we're designing features and we're looking at new things we're going to do, we're asking the question, what would Rani do? And we're linking it back to that and trying to understand how would she cope when we go through this. And I'll go through some of the other personas later on. And then principle 3, every team member gains valuable experience with vulnerable users. So we had we've made it a team decision that all team members must attend at least one research session. Without doubt, that's happened, and many more, in fact, actually. And this is a really key one. I was talking to one of the developers the other day, and he was saying that he'd felt quite detached from what he was working on. And actually, when he went to a session and sat down and sort of was involved and saw the end users there, really started to understand who he was designing for and what it meant to them, and could really get empathy and understand their needs. So we've been doing that throughout, and it's really valuable. It helps the whole team gel and understand who they're doing it for. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the research now. Personas. So we've got 5 personas here. Persona is a real-world example of your users, and you can give them lots of different traits and behaviours, but it's grounded in the work that was done in the discovery and the alpha, subject matter experts, and the research through the beta. We've got 5 personas here. They're all primary personas. I'm just going to read out some of them so you can understand. So we've got Julie. She's a single mum. She's got 1 child. She's currently on the scheme. We've got Lisa. Lisa's 21. She's first time pregnant. And Julie and Lisa make up the bulk of our user group, in fact. But then we've got these other 3. So we've got Rani. I mentioned her earlier. She's a single mum, lives in emergency accommodation, limited English, basic digital skills. So lots of vulnerability there. We've got Andy. Andy got pregnant at 15, lives rurally, lives with a mum, starts college when she's 19. And then we've got Josh, single dad, seasonal worker. So he's changing income, basic digital skills. And the key point here is that we are looking at all of those. We consider them all primary. Despite the numbers, the figures behind them, we are trying to build to all of these and understand their needs and make sure we meet their needs. This is Julie. This is our persona here. So what we realized with, you're building a service. The service is something that, and we've spoken to many people on the scheme, and they've been on the scheme for years. We met a lady a few weeks ago. She's been on it for 15 years, through her childhood. I think she was on it at 16, and up to the age of 30. And the thing about it is that we needed to somehow plot that service, that life events into the personas. So what we did is we took the personas and we gave them life events. And you can see here that Julie's got 5 different life events. First child, becomes pregnant with a second child, give birth to a second child, and then leaves the scheme. So there's quite a lot. And you can start to then plot the vulnerability and see, okay, in this situation, what would she need? Or in this situation, what would she need? So it's not just about a single point in time. It's about the whole life cycle of this persona going through your service. And that was really important because Healthy Start means a lot to the people that are using it. They love it. We've had that feedback. They're really passionate about it, and so we need to make it work for them throughout the life that they're on it. So this is some of the research that we've done so far. We started off thinking we might need to do a certain amount of research and do this, and it's changed and it's grown. We've got diary studies, we've got many interviews, we've got surveys, we've got guerrilla testing, and we developed as we went through and tried these different research styles and what we needed to do. And the interesting thing is the findings that we got, and not necessarily the findings from the research, but the findings about the research, were that vulnerable users are difficult to find and need extra support during research. And this is the key point, really, is that we had to adapt our research to suit. In the beginning, we were running face-to-face interviews. Those interviews were useful, of course, but we found a problem in that people just weren't turning up. And they needed, gets to the heart of the vulnerability, really. When they've got low confidence, apathy, low self-esteem, all these kind of things fit into, okay, so we've booked them, but they're not coming. So we had to adapt. So we had to work with the Children's Centre to really sort of just contact them much more. So there's a lot more phone calls, a lot more texts. In fact, they responded better to texts. because when they get a call and they don't recognise it, they don't necessarily want to answer that call. So we were texting them, and we were giving that extra support, really, just to make sure we got them. We also tried different styles, so we'd realised that, okay, we're maybe not going to be able to speak to them face-to-face. So we used telephone calls as well. We did one bit of research via email, because the lady in particular wasn't comfortable talking on the phone. That was her particular anxiety. And we did guerrilla testing as well. So we went into Children's Centre and caught people there and just spoke to them. And we always tried to make it, our research was always in a children's centre or somewhere comfortable and safe that they were happy to be in. Service blueprint. So service blueprint is more or less what it says. It's a end-to-end map showing the service and all the points that somebody within it will interact with. We've, in this instance, we've got a lot because we've got the healthcare professionals, we've got the beneficiaries, and we've got the retailers. And they kind of mesh into one another. Healthcare professionals in particular are very important because they get the beneficiaries onto the scheme. They're their kind of first point of contact. The beneficiaries obviously have got they're receiving a card, they're going out to spend it. There's all their kind of touch points. And then the retailers, they're accepting the cards. So that just gives an outline of the different service blueprints that we need in the whole service blueprint, because it is an end-to-end service. So one of the things we did right at the kickoff is we got a team together and we plotted out this. And this is the actual service end-to-end that we wanted it to be and how we understood it to be. And you've got awareness, so how do they become aware of the scheme? And we've got applying and then spending right through to leaving the scheme. And this is the first draft of this to understand, okay, this is what we want it to look like. Where are the points that we need to focus our efforts? How the persona is going to deal with these certain points along the way. Moving on from that, we flesh it out and we create this. So this is a more detailed look at the service. This is, we take the sort of post-it wall and we turn it into this. And the key bit here is these two swim lanes at the bottom. So we've got thinking and feeling. So as we go through the service, we can start to go, okay, so how are they going to be thinking and feeling at this point? And we understand that from the research we've done. In particular, if you look here, we've got the awareness. So become aware of the scheme. It's green. They're happy. That's good. They're going to get this, this card with some money on it, and they can buy some food for their children. But then we get to the, I need to apply now, and I need to apply online. Okay, well, that involves going onto a computer. I might not have credit on my phone, so I might not be able to do that. I might not have access to a computer. It might be language that I don't understand. So the anxiety there. So how do we then design for that? And then there's a decision point as well. So I've got to make a decision here. Somebody's going to pass a judgment on whether I'm eligible. That's another point of anxiety. So by plotting this out and understanding those points, we can really start to delve into what is it that we need to do at that moment to make it easier for these particular vulnerable users in particular, really get through the system, and linking back to that leaving no one behind. So we did a diary study, a card trial. And this involves 11 beneficiaries, 2 weeks, 1 card each, and they were asked to use the card, go out and do their shopping as they would. There's money on the card. And they're asked to fill in these forms here after each point. And they had a task list. Task list was essentially use the card, activate the card, and then check your balance. I won't go through all this. We've got a lot of feedback from this, a lot of really good feedback, a lot of understanding around some of the issues, but I will just talk about 2 of them. First one is a single shop. So without doubt, this has been the most sort of joyous thing for them, I guess, is the fact that with the vouchers, they have to spend the £3.10. So if they go and want to buy a bottle of milk, they have to get some apples or something like that. With the card, they don't have to do that. They can go out, they can get a bottle of milk. So it's that single shop, that simple and flexible flexibility for them just to be able to do that. The multi-shop, so there's a multi-shop is where they're buying healthy start items, so it might be milk and fruit and veg, and also maybe some of their own items like biscuits or bread or something. That was more complicated because at the till you have to then negotiate with the card. So you've got the card to pay for the healthy start stuff, and you've got your card or some cash to pay with your other stuff. So there's a lot of cognition that needs to go on, and what we found is that about half of the participants were okay with that. They kind of, yeah, okay, I can deal with this, it's not a problem. The other half were more challenged by it. They all managed to do it, they all managed to shop, but there's a lot more challenge around, okay, how do I work this? Normally I just give a voucher, now I've got to deal with these two cards. So understanding that allowed us to, okay, how are we gonna deal with that? So we're working with the retailers on that as a way of kind of making that less complicated, and we might signpost as well. We haven't quite, still working on it, but it's really thinking about anticipating that challenge that they might have and trying to work out and help them through it, essentially.
So one thing we wanted to cover was, so this service is quite different to a lot of services. This is not a one-off or infrequent transactional service like a lot of services that are designed especially for government. So it's not like renewing a driving license or filling a tax return. This is a scheme that someone might be involved in for sometimes 10, 15 years. It's something people interact with on a daily basis a lot of the time. So, and people really rely on it, especially particularly the vulnerable users. We know that people really rely on this service, especially at the current time with a lot of food poverty, etc. And you can kind of break the service down into 3 areas. So there's the application. So yep, you go on, you go online, apply for your card. Ideally, get an immediate response, but not all the time. And then there's some management behind the scenes that we need to do. We need a help desk, etc. And then people need to spend the money. So each of these areas, we look at how the most vulnerable users are affected by design decisions that we make. So if you look at apply, so currently we know that it's quite stressful for people to fill in a form, post it out, and wait to see if they get some vouchers, and call up if they don't get vouchers. So we're designing an application form to give real-time results. So we've got data feeds and APIs to say, right, is someone eligible or not? However, sometimes we don't know just then. We're going to have to come back. We have to be really, really careful about kind of phishing attempts and stuff. I think we already mentioned that a lot of our users are fleeing domestic abuse. Some people move around a lot. So one example of a problem we've had to look at is when we're capturing. So we need someone's address to be able to say whether they're eligible or not. If someone's put in the wrong address, we can't go back and say, oh, your address is wrong, because we really need to be really careful that someone's not phishing to find out the address of the vulnerable user. So those are the kind of things that we really need to think about when we're designing. And the managed side of things, so we know that currently a lot of people call the help desk around the time their vouchers are due because they're waiting for the money, that they're reliant on it. So we need to make sure that we can communicate with people, send them text messages or emails or whatever to say that money's come in. And also people go on and off the service, so we have to check eligibility every 4 weeks. So people's amount changes, people will drop off. So we want to proactively tell people when there are changes without frightening people, I guess. So we want to encourage people to self-serve as much as possible, but also we don't want to leave anyone behind. So some people aren't going to be able to interact with the application form, and they're not going to be able to, they might not understand the emails and messages they get. So we need to give them a channel where they can call up or they can get help. And spend. So I guess this is really the key part. So at the moment, people have a voucher, they have to spend that voucher in its entirety. Now, if they have a card, they can go and buy a pint of milk. They don't have to go around and also get a bag of apples and a banana to go with it just to make up £3.10. However, there are complications that come with that, some of the ones that Chris mentioned as well. So we're solving some things like stolen vouchers, but what do we do about stolen cards, lost cards, etc.? So I'll hand you back to Chris.
I don't need that. Thank you. So we just got a couple of slides now on the successes and learning. So there's 3 successes, also there's much more, but these are the ones that we've highlighted. We did a lot of testing with the language. Language is a big thing. You'll have certain vulnerabilities around low literacy, obviously English is second language. And we were testing with some, in Plymouth it was, with some Syrian ladies who were in receipt of the Healthy Start. And they picked up on, this is just one example, but they picked up on 18. And it just had under 18. It didn't have the years old. And it was just that little bit that they got stuck on and couldn't quite understand. There was lots of talk with the sort of interpreter around it. But it's that little thing, and that when you start to add up all those little things, you get a whole, a net effect of it being much more understandable. The flexibility for people to have more choice, we talked a bit about that in terms of being able to just go out, get a pint of milk, come back and not having to spend £3.10. And then we found quite early on as well that the choice of the retailers, 22,000 retailers registered on the scheme. Our users that we were speaking to were really keen about opening that up so that they could shop anywhere, essentially. Learnings. Yes, I've talked a little bit about the participants not turning up for research. So really the learning there was about being much more flexible and kind of agile around how you're talking to users. And we've tried lots of different avenues, which I've mentioned. Again, the retailer registration, we removed that. So now they're going to be able to shop use their cards anywhere. And again, there's flexibility as well. Just that introduction card increases the flexibility. But it also, we've got a challenge in the multi-shop. How do we get around this idea of 2 cards and them having to, which is something we're still working with the retailers on that one.
Back over to me to sum up quickly. So, in conclusion, what we found is that the key thing to remember in working with vulnerable users is kind of product design plus. You need to consider everything that you do much more carefully than with users who don't have these vulnerabilities, and ensure that you embed the principles from the very beginning. It really worked for us to have those 3 key principles that Chris talked about from the very outset and sort of carry those through, and have those vulnerable users at the forefront of our mind so that they don't get left behind, which is obviously, as we've said a few times in this presentation, our primary goal. So we're listening to our users, we're talking to them continuously throughout, and as a result of the insights that we've gained from them, we're changing legislation, we're changing policy, and we're really making sure that we design a service that meets their needs. So I think we've got a little bit of time to take a couple of questions if there are any, but if you can't catch us now, we'll be downstairs at the Equal Experts stand in Studio C if anybody wants to come and have a chat about the project. But thank you very much for listening.